Hey, Priscilla. Tommy Givens here, professor of the course. Wanted to send along a video reply here in week one to your work that you've submitted in both response forums, which is excellent, by the way, and just gives me a chance to welcome you to the course a little more directly and get our conversation started off, hopefully on the right foot. So you got some really good, I think, highlights from the readings in the Bible in terms of who Israel is. What I want to underscore and what you've written is the way that Israel never ceases to be itself, even in its disobedience. And sometimes we, in the Christian tradition, have imagined that what it means to be the people of God is to meet certain criteria, to meet certain conditions, to have certain beliefs, or to live up to a certain standard. And that just doesn't match what we find here in the Bible, where Israel is the people of God, whether they obey or not, whether they're faithful or not, whether they believe the right things or not. And as you've shown, that doesn't mean that there are no consequences for being unfaithful or disobedient or for having beliefs that are not true. But those consequences don't separate the people of God from God. God remains committed to them by promise and by covenant. And this is going to play out in Jesus's life in a way that we want to pay close attention to. Jesus is not going to disown people who reject him or who don't believe what he says or anything like that. He will warn them, but then he will go and himself face the very consequences that he has foretold are to occur to people who reject his call to repent. And that tells us something about who Jesus is as God with us. It's not someone who threatens people with abandonment if they don't obey him, but instead warns them about what will occur if people refuse his call, but then remains with people and joins them in the suffering that might befall them if they don't repent in the way that he teaches. So that's an important insight that I think you have laid good groundwork for in your response to the question of who Israel is in the light of biblical testimony. And what you say about the genealogy, I think you've got some really good, just kind of quick, punchy takes on what the genealogy tells us about who Jesus is, and in some ways tells us already what the kingdom in Israel was about and what Israel is about, because the genealogy evokes the history of Israel and of the kingdom as they are embodied by Jesus. And I love especially what you say about this promise that God will not overlook those that society does. Instead, Jesus seems to even prioritize those kinds of people, as you go on to say. God remains faithful even when human beings are not. And it's precisely this way that God does not give up on the people with whom God has entered into a kind of covenant bond over generations. That very commitment of God's faithfulness, even when God's people are unfaithful, that is the hope of Gentile peoples, not only after Jesus's life, but throughout the memory of Israel. God has always been bringing blessing to Gentile people through Israel's life and blessing Israel's life through Gentile people, whether it's Jethro or some of these mothers like Ruth in Jesus's own genealogical past that's remembered in Matthew. So it's crucial, I think, to see that this kind of hospitality for Gentile peoples is itself a function of God's generosity to Israel. And so let's see if we can kind of watch how that plays out with Jesus's very intense focus, not only just on Israel, but on the part of his people that are living in the promised land under these conditions of foreign occupation, a lot of corrupt government, a fabric of people that is torn in a variety of ways. It's not that Jesus doesn't care about people that live farther away, whether they're Jews or Gentiles, but Jesus sort of really embodies the intense commitment of God to this place and the people in this place that bear the wounds of the long dramatic history of God and the people of Israel. And it's precisely Jesus's intense faithfulness there, his solidarity with the unfaithful there, that bears so much promise, both for Jews living farther afield and for Samaritans who are part of Israel, and even Gentile peoples to the four corners of the earth. So lots of implications, I think, for our calling as Christians, as disciples of Jesus, as communities who bear witness to this merciful way of God. But we will be spending the rest of the quarter hopefully teasing some of that out. Thanks for getting us off to a good start with some great responses. Welcome to the course, and looking forward to more conversation with you in the weeks ahead.